Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Mariah is still struggling with her own mental health battles. She believes she's working to return home to a wife who's waiting with open arms. She has no idea that her absence has created a void, and Daniel has filled it. If Mariah comes back to find Daniel woven into every space she left empty, trust may be impossible to rebuild. This isn't just a flirtation. This is the beginning of a choice, one that could destroy a marriage and redefine two families. Tessa and Daniel say they know the limits. But every moment they cling to each other tightens the pull towards something neither is ready to name. Someone's heart is going to break. The only question is whether Tessa can live with the outcome. Tessa finally admits what could break Mariah's heart. Mariah's confession, Nick's warning and Holden's threat. Tune in to find out about the drama happening in Genoa City. Mariah while Nick has a big warning for Phyllis. Plus, Holden and Audra exchange threats as things get intense in Genoa City. Tune in next week so you can catch all of the action in Genoa City. Jack finally saw the side of Diane that he had been trying to ignore, and it left him unsettled about the choices they'd made as a couple. Meanwhile, Ka surprised Claire with a proposal that seemed more like an attempt to fix their recent conflict than a carefully planned moment of love. Claire was caught off guard and unsure how to respond. Across town, Audra turned to Nate, insisting she deserved a second chance despite her betrayals, leaving him torn between his head and his heart. Victor pressed Kane into a corner with a deal that was less negotiation and more ultimatum, showing just how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. Claire didn't escape the drama either. Kyle's timing and words caught her completely off guard, sparking even more doubt about his true intentions. Meanwhile, Amanda made a bold move for Phyllis, putting herself at risk in hopes of salvaging a partnership and proving her loyalty, even as the odds seemed stacked against her. Mariah is still struggling with her own mental health battles, clinging to the belief that she's fighting her way back to a home where her wife waits with open arms, a home she imagines exactly as she left it, unchanged, untouched, safe, but the truth is far messier, far darker, and far more heartbreaking than anything she's prepared to face, because while she's been away trying to piece her mind back together, her absence has created a void so wide and so echoing that someone else has quietly stepped in to fill it, someone who never intended to but also never stepped back once it began, Daniel, who became Tessa's comfort, her stability, her late-night confessor and midday distraction, the person she leaned on when the silence in the apartment grew too heavy and the fear of losing Mariah became too sharp to manage alone, and now his presence is woven into every space Mariah left empty, the couch cushion beside Tessa where she cried herself to sleep, the studio chair she couldn't bring herself to sit in alone, the coffee counter where she once waited for Mariah's morning smile. Daniel is everywhere without meaning to be, and Tessa hasn't found a way to untangle herself from the support she needed even though she swears it's nothing more than friendship, nothing more than temporary closeness, nothing more than emotional survival. Yet every moment she and Daniel cling to each other tightens the pull towards something neither is ready to name, something dangerous, something that could shatter every vow ever made. Because this isn't just a flirtation, not a casual leaning, not a harmless crossing of lines, this is the beginning of a choice, one that could destroy a marriage, rewire two families, and redraw the emotional map of Genoa City in ways none of them will be able to reverse once the truth comes out, and the terrifying part is that even they can feel it now, that slow creeping shift, that gravity between them that wasn't supposed to exist, and someone's heart is going to break. The only question is whether Tessa can live with the outcome once Mariah returns and finally sees what's been happening in her absence, because Tessa is finally admitting, at least to herself, what could break Mariah's heart, that she needed someone, that Daniel stepped into a role that should have belonged to Mariah, and that she let it happen even though it terrifies her to imagine saying those words out loud. Meanwhile, far from the emotional disaster building around her, Mariah is preparing a confession of her own, a raw and unfiltered truth about the spiraling fear, the panic attacks, the sleepless nights, and the crushing guilt she's been carrying for leaving Tessa alone in the first place. But before she can even voice any of it, Nick enters the orbit of drama with a warning so sharp, so direct, and so full of brotherly fire that it shakes Phyllis to her core, because Nick has seen patterns forming, manipulations brewing, and he knows better than anyone what Phyllis is capable of when she feels cornered or threatened, and he refuses to let her derail yet another fragile situation in Genoa City, especially not now, when emotions are already stretched thin and alliances are brittle. But even Nick's warning pales next to the battle brewing elsewhere, where Holden and Audra exchange threats with poisonous precision, each word a challenge, each glare a promise of escalation, both of them circling each other like two predators forced into the same cage, knowing only one of them is going to walk away unscathed as the stakes get higher and the tension grows thick enough to choke on, and Genoa City feels like it's vibrating under the weight of so many secrets, so many lies, so many shifting loyalties. And while all of this chaos unfolds, Jack is dealing with a revelation of his own, the moment he finally saw a side of Diane he had been trying so desperately to ignore, the side that was cunning, calculating, and inching dangerously close to the behaviors he convinced himself she had left behind, and the sight of it left him deeply unsettled about the choices they've made as a couple, the trust he thought they'd rebuilt, and the future he was so confident they were headed toward. But now nothing feels stable, not even the ground beneath his feet. Across town, Kyle, in a move that shocked even himself, surprised Claire with a proposal that felt less like a declaration of love and more like a desperate attempt to fix the widening crack in their relationship, a crack formed from mistrust, insecurity, and the whirlwind of drama they'd been pulled into, and Claire was caught completely off guard, not touched, not swept away, not overjoyed, but startled, confused, and deeply uncertain whether Kyle's intentions came from his heart or from his fear of losing control, fear of losing her, fear of facing the consequences of his own actions. At the same time, Audra turned to Nate in a moment of emotional vulnerability, insisting she deserved a second chance despite the betrayals, the lies, the manipulation, the corporate chaos she left in her wake, and Nate found himself torn between his head and his heart, between the logic that told him to stay far away and the memories that reminded him why he fell for her in the first place, and the more she pleaded, the more his resolve trembled. Elsewhere, Victor was pressing Kane into a corner with a deal that was less negotiation and more ultimatum, a reminder of just how powerful and ruthless the Newman patriarch can be when he wants something badly enough, and this was not a deal Kane could walk away from without consequences, because Victor made it clear, either Kane accepted his terms, or he would find himself up against a force far larger and far more dangerous than he could handle alone, and Kane knew it. Meanwhile, Claire was still struggling to process Kyle's rash proposal, her mind spinning as she replayed the timing, the tone, the subtle hints that this wasn't about love at all, and as she pulled away emotionally, doubt spread through their fragile relationship like wildfire. And if that wasn't enough, Amanda was making a bold, risky move for Phyllis, stepping into a line of fire she didn't belong in, putting her reputation and her future on the line in hopes of salvaging not just a partnership but her own pride and purpose, even though the odds were stacked heavily against her, because Phyllis's chaos had a way of consuming anyone who got too close. And now, as all of these threads tighten, Mariah fighting her way home, Tessa drowning in guilt and forbidden attachment, Daniel trapped between loyalty and longing, Nick raising alarms that will echo through the coming days, Holden and Audra circling each other with venomous promises, Jack questioning everything he thought he knew, Kyle pushing a relationship to the brink with a proposal that wasn't rooted in love, Nate trying to separate truth from temptation, Victor tightening his grip on Kane's future, Claire questioning Kyle's intentions, and Amanda risking everything for Phyllis. Genoa City stands on the edge of an emotional storm, one that's about to break open in explosive, devastating, unforgettable ways, and when Mariah finally returns and discovers the truth about the emotional cracks forming behind her back, nothing will ever be the same, because someone is going to walk away shattered, someone is going to make a choice they can't undo, and someone is going to learn that the most dangerous secrets are the ones whispered in the spaces left behind. But as the clock ticks closer to Mariah's return, the emotional fault lines running through Genoa City deepen with every passing hour, and the people caught in the center of this growing storm can feel the pressure building, though none more intensely than Tessa, who wakes each morning with a churning stomach and a tightening chest, knowing she's walking a razor edge between devotion and betrayal, reality and denial, and she can't decide which terrifies her more, the possibility that Mariah will be too fragile to handle the truth, or that Mariah will be strong enough to look her in the eye and ask the one question Tessa has no real answer for. Did you reach for him because I wasn't here? Or because you wanted to, and the guilt is eating her alive, because while she may not have touched Daniel in a way that breaks vows, she has leaned on him, relied on him, confided in him, let him become a presence in her life that Mariah never agreed to, and deep down, in the quiet hour before sunrise when she's the most honest with herself, Tessa knows she let Daniel slip into a place no one but Mariah should have filled. Daniel feels it too, though he tries desperately to convince himself and her that their closeness is harmless, protective, temporary, but it's the way his voice falters, the way he lingers when she pulls back, the way he watches her with concern that has become too tender, too personal, too much, that reveals the truth neither of them have dared to say aloud, that emotional lines have already been crossed, and if Mariah walks through that door and sees the bond they've formed, the damage may be impossible to reverse. Meanwhile, Mariah is preparing for home with a blend of hope and dread that keeps her heart racing, because she's terrified Tessa will look different, sound different, feel distant, not because Tessa would ever intentionally hurt her, but because Mariah knows the toll her absence has taken on their life, and she worries she's coming back to a wife who learned how to survive without her. She rehearses her confession again and again in her mind, the words catching in her throat, the panic spirals, the sleepless nights, the self-blame so sharp it left bruises on her spirit, the fear that she was losing herself piece by piece, and the shame of knowing that healing meant sacrificing time with the person she loves most, and she dreams of a reunion filled with forgiveness, warmth, and patience, unaware that the emotional reality waiting for her is far more complicated than anything she's prepared for, while she edges closer to a home that no longer feels untouched. Nick is working overtime to keep explosive chaos from spreading further, especially after his confrontation with Phyllis, whose reaction to his warning was fiery enough to shake the floor beneath them. Phyllis refuses to be told what to do, refuses to let anyone cage her, and Nick's attempt to stop her from interfering in situations she has no business touching only poured gasoline on her determination, because Phyllis Summers thrives on turmoil, on sharp edges, on the thrill of being in the center of every emotional explosion in town, and despite Nick's plea, she is positioning herself exactly where she shouldn't be, near the very heart of Tessa, Mariah, Daniel, and all the messy threads tying them together, and if Phyllis senses an advantage, even emotional, even accidental, she will grab it before anyone can pull it from her hands. Yet even her chaos pales in comparison to the toxic tension between Holden and Audra as their conflict escalates to levels neither anticipated, with threats exchanged like currency and accusations flying like sparks, and Genoa City's undercurrent feels charged with something dangerous, something that hints at a looming collision where one or both of them may cross the line into unforgivable territory. Across town, Jack struggles to focus on anything except the moment he saw Diane's mask slip, revealing a calculating glint he prayed he'd never see again, and his unease grows heavier each day, lodged in his chest like a weight he can't dislodge. He loves her, he wants to trust her, but he can't ignore the instinct screaming at him that something is wrong, that history has a way of repeating, especially when Diane feels threatened or cornered, and Jack is wrestling with a truth he doesn't want to face. That the future he rebuilt with Diane may not be as solid as he believed. Meanwhile, Kyle, shaken by his own impulsive proposal to Claire, spends the next several days attempting to pretend everything is normal, that he didn't just throw a life-altering question at her as a patch for their unresolved conflict. And every time he looks at her, the uncertainty in her eyes twists his stomach tighter, because this wasn't the reaction he imagined when he pictured proposing. He thought she would light up, melt, fall into his arms, but instead she froze, confused and cautious, and now the silence between them is ringing louder than any argument they've had. Claire, for her part, is overwhelmed by the pressure of the moment, unsure whether Kyle's offer came from love or fear, whether he wants her or simply wants stability after emotional chaos, and her hesitation weighs heavily on her heart as the days stretch toward a decision she's not sure she's ready to make. And while all this unfolds, Audra seeks Nate again, driven by a mix of vulnerability and relentless self-preservation, insisting she has changed, that she deserves a second chance, that she wants to rebuild something real, and Nate, caught between reason and emotion, feels himself breaking apart, pulled toward her even as every warning bell in his mind goes off, because part of him still cares, still aches, still remembers what they had, And the internal war is leaving him exhausted. Victor, meanwhile, isn't letting up on Kane. Every conversation feels like a tightening noose, a reminder that Victor Newman's deals are never as optional as they appear, and Kane is coming to realize that refusing Victor's terms may cost him far more than he can afford to lose. Amanda, still risking herself for Phyllis, navigates treacherous terrain with increasing pressure, knowing one wrong step could cost her career, her partnership, or her own equilibrium, but she pushes forward anyway, unwilling to let Phyllis crumble, or explode, without at least trying to anchor her. But the true center of this building storm remains Tessa, Daniel, and Mariah, and the emotional gravity pulling them toward an inevitable reckoning, because as Mariah's return draws nearer, Daniel finds himself withdrawing from Tessa in sudden, guilty bursts, trying to create space, trying to pull back before things go too far, but it only makes things more strained, more awkward, more painful, and Tessa feels each shift like a bruise, her guilt swelling even further. She tries to throw herself into work, into music, into anything that distracts her from the truth, but nothing is strong enough to cut through the anxiety weaving itself into her every thought, because she knows the house won't feel the same once Mariah walks through that door, and she doesn't know how to bridge the emotional chasm that's forming between intention and outcome, and Daniel, for all his attempts to step away, can't stop the instinct to check on her, to show up at the worst possible moments, to be present when she feels weakest, and every time he does, Tessa's fear deepens, because she knows they are building something dangerous, something unspoken but undeniably real, and as the days stretch thinner and the tension grows thicker, word quietly spreads around Genoa City that Mariah is coming home sooner than expected, news that sends shockwaves through the people closest to this emotional triangle: Kyle, who overhears a conversation he shouldn't have; Nick, who recognizes the warning signs of a heartbreak waiting to explode; Sharon, who senses the emotional imbalance coming from her daughters and feels powerless to stop it; and even Phyllis, who becomes almost too interested in the emotional fragility at stake, knowing that vulnerable hearts often create opportunities for chaos. And as the hour of Mariah's arrival draws near, Tessa stands in the apartment staring at the door, her fingers trembling, her mind racing with every confession she hasn't yet spoken, every boundary she didn't maintain, every moment she leaned on someone who wasn't her wife, while Daniel sits alone in his own space, running his hands through his hair, trying to convince himself that everything will be fine, that feelings can be pushed down, erased, dismissed, but deep in his gut he knows, once Mariah sees the subtle shifts, the closeness, the emotional fingerprints left all over Tessa's recent weeks, everything will unravel. Because even if nothing physical happened, the betrayal of emotion is sometimes sharper, deeper, and longer lasting, and in the final stretch before Mariah steps through that door, the emotional atmosphere in Genoa City grows electric, humming with secrets ready to burst, alliances ready to fracture, and hearts poised to break, because the truth is no longer something that can be avoided, it is coming, fast and unstoppable, and when it hits, nothing in these intertwined relationships will ever be the same again. And as the final hours tick down before Mariah's return, the tension saturates the air so thickly that even the walls of the apartment seem to hold their breath, and Tessa feels like she's moving through molasses, each step heavier than the last as she tries to prepare herself for a reunion she once dreamed of but now fears might shatter the fragile balance she's built in Mariah's absence. She keeps rearranging the same stack of mail, fluffing the same pillow, wiping down the same countertop. Anything to distract her hands from trembling because she knows, that Mariah will walk through this door and immediately sense that something is off, something unspoken, something that wasn't here before she left, and Tessa has no idea how to hide the guilt etched into her bloodstream. It doesn't help that Daniel has been avoiding her all day, sending one-word replies instead of showing up like he usually does, and the distance only makes her more aware of how entwined they've become, because she misses the presence she shouldn't have needed in the first place, and that alone is a betrayal she dreads confessing. Meanwhile, miles away, Mariah sits in the back of a car taking her home, her fingers nervously tapping her knee as she rehearses the story she'll tell Tessa about the panic spirals, the sleepless nights, the therapy breakthroughs, and the fragile hope she's carried with her every morning like a cracked piece of glass, praying she'll put it down safely once she reaches home. She presses her forehead to the window, imagining Tessa's smile, Tessa's arms, the warmth she's been aching for, never suspecting that the emotional landscape she left behind has shifted under her feet, that the woman she loves is standing on ground that's already beginning to crumble. Across Genoa City, Daniel sits alone in the dim light of the athletic club lounge, staring at his untouched drink, battling the conflicting storm inside him, the part that wants to be supportive, reliable, pure intention, and the part that aches with something deeper, something dangerous, something he's terrified to name because naming it would make it real, and real would make everything he's done unforgivable. He runs his hands through his hair, whispering to himself that Mariah's return will fix everything, create distance naturally, relieve Tessa's need for him, but deep down, he fears what will happen when he sees Mariah's eyes, when he hears her voice, when the woman whose absence pulled him into this emotional entanglement finally steps back into the world where he never meant to trespass. At Crimson Lights, Sharon pauses mid-pour as a sudden chill crawls up her spine, a mother's intuition warning her of an emotional storm heading straight for her daughters, and even though she can't pinpoint it, she knows something is coming, something big, something painful, and she silently prays that whatever Mariah is bringing home, it doesn't collide with something. Tessa has been hiding. Elsewhere in town, Nick finishes yet another phone call, his jaw tight with frustration after discovering Phyllis has already inserted herself into the Tessa-Mariah Daniel situation by sharing a few innocent observations with the wrong people, her meddling traveling through Genoa City like a spark racing toward dry timber, and Nick knows that if Phyllis fans this flame even an inch further, the resulting firestorm could leave scorched earth in its wake, and still. Circling the edges of all this turmoil is Holden, whose threats to Audra have only grown more pointed, more venomous, and more dangerous, promising that their ongoing war will soon hit levels no one in Genoa City expects, while Audra herself moves like a tightly wound spring, waiting for the moment when she either strikes or gets struck. But none of that drama compares to the emotional earthquake waiting at the apartment, where Tessa stands frozen in front of the mirror, trying to steady her breathing, her heartbeat pounding against her ribs as she whispers Mariah's name like a mantra, like a prayer, like an apology she hasn't yet formed, and in that moment she wishes she could rewind time, change decisions, create boundaries she failed to maintain, and erase the guilt she's been drowning in. Daniel's name flashes on her phone for half a second before the screen goes black again. He's typing, deleting, typing again, and she knows he's struggling too, knows he's battling fear, longing, guilt, and the sudden cold shock of what they're both about to face once Mariah returns, and the reality hits her like a tidal wave. Even if nothing physical happened, even if they never crossed the line in the way people recognize, the emotional bond they built in Mariah's absence is a secret with the power to detonate everything. And as the elevator dings somewhere down the hall,